அன்புடன் நமது கிராமங்களிலிருந்து ஆரோக்கியா பால்.
Welcome to episode 1 of Ramayana with Anuja. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure and privilege to share the story of the Ramayana, the Adikavya, with you. Please be sure to join me for every single episode. It's going to be really incredible. Now, before I share the story itself, let's look at the story behind the story, which is equally interesting. Everyone knows that the Ramayana was authored by Valmiki. Now, Valmiki was a highly respected sage in his age. He hadn't always been so respected, but he had risen in life, and he had his ashram, a beautiful little place on the banks of the river Tamasya. He had lots of students, and he used to share his knowledge with them, and it was a very, very peaceful spiritual abode. And now in this beautiful peaceable spot, there arrived a very, very special visitor. It was none other than sage Narada. Now Narada and Valmiki had a very, very special connection, and unlike other people who became very anxious when Narada showed up, Valmiki was very, very happy, and he embraced him most warmly. Now it was believed that Narada, who was a devotee of Lord Vishnu, was something of a mischief monger, a troublemaker, but in reality he was actually an instrument chosen by fate to usually trigger or start a series of events that had already been preordained by fate. And after the pleasantries had been exchanged with Valmiki, the two of them settled down for a chat. And now, before I tell you what they spoke about, let's go back a little bit and explore the connection between Valmiki and Narada. As I already told you, Valmiki had not started out life on a very impressive footing. There was lots of tragedy, there was lots of trauma in his life. He had been abandoned by his parents as an infant, and this little baby grew up with no one to look after him, and he had to fend for himself. It was a very, very cruel world, and he realized that in a dog eats dog world, he had to be the dog with the worst bite, I guess. So he used to be a hunter, a thief, a murderer. He did whatever it took to survive, basically, and his lists of crimes were most grievous because he preyed on his fellow humans, and it's hard to believe that he was a family man, but he was. He had a wife and he had children, and he justified all his actions saying that everything he did was for their welfare. And so it went on like this, and there was a lot of blood on his hands, and it would have gone on like that, but it was at that point that he met a very special person. One day business was very slow for him, unfortunately. People steered clear of his neck of the woods, and he was desperate. That's when he saw a holy man, and he attacked as usual. He had a sharp knife with him, and he said, "Give me all your valuables or I will kill you." And he played this stunt on many, many people, and it was normal for people to react with terror. You know, they'll flee from him, they'll struggle. But this man was completely unperturbed. He was totally calm, and he said, "I don't have anything to give you that you would value, but I do have other valuable things. If you're interested, I will share that with you." And for some reason, at that time Valmiki went by the name of Ratnakar, and Ratnakar was quite, he was just intrigued, I should say. And there was something about this man. He still held his knife. He said, "What do you have that is so valuable?" And that man said, "I don't think you're ready for it yet." And Ratnakar didn't usually chat with his victims. It was usually a quick process where he would rob them, and if they struggled, he would kill them immediately. But this time round, something held him back, and he really wanted to talk to this stranger. There was something about this stranger which made Ratnakar want to share some of the things he'd never shared with anybody before. There was a strange rapport between them. And Narada, very casually, he started conversing with him. There was a certain ease of manner he had, which made it easy for this monster to confide in him. And Narada asked him, he said, how do you justify leading an existence like this? There's so much hatred, there's so much anger. while it's true that life has been very cruel to you, I should say, how do you justify an existence like this where you destroy the lives of so many people? Those people also have children, they have wives, and you have destroyed their livelihood. So how do you justify this? And he didn't ask in a very judgmental way, he didn't condemn him, it was more out of curiosity. And Ratnakar thought about it, and he said, see, in this world nobody's done me any favors. I don't feel I owe anything to anybody. All that matters to me are the well-being of my wife and children. I do care for them, and as long as they are well fed and content and happy, I don't think I should stop doing what I'm doing. The world hasn't given me so many options. And Narada said, okay, that's interesting, but every action has a consequence. You can't get away with the things you've been doing. You said that you're doing all this for your family. Now, when your life has run its allotted term, what happens next? There will be punishment in store for you. Will your family share that punishment with you? Is that something you're willing to accept? And again it was a question, and Ratnakar thought about it, and there was a strange anxiety in his heart, a lot of dread, and again he picked up his knife. He said, stay right where you are. I will go home, I will talk to my wife and children, I will come back, don't move. If you go anywhere, I will kill you. And Narada said, don't worry, I am going to wait here, and he knew it was the truth. He knew that this man did not lie. And Ratnakar made his way homeward, and again he felt the burden, the sorrow, the crimes, the sins of the years he'd lived. It suddenly weighed down on him, and his step was heavy. And he walked home, and his wife looked, and she said, hello, where's the money, where's the food? You've come back empty handed. And Ratnakar said, let's not talk about all that right now, I have something to ask you. And she was thinking, how am I supposed to feed my children? Why does this man want to talk philosophy now? And Ratnakar asked her, do you think it's okay that we are living off the sorrow and misery of others? I've had so many people be cruel to me, and now I am doing that to so many more people. Do you think it's justified, all this sin? And she said, you know, we've also got to eat, so you've got to do what you've got to do. And he said, what about what happens after? I was told that I will be punished for this life. Will you share in this punishment with me? And she said, no. She said, every man is responsible for his own actions. I don't see why I have to answer for your sins. And he didn't say it out aloud, but Ratnakar was thinking that she enjoyed the benefits of his deeds. If there was punishment, she wasn't willing to share it. It bothered him. And then he turned to his children, and he figured the young are more pure-spirited, that they would be more affectionate towards him, but it was the same. His son also said the same thing. He said, why, it's your decision, you know, as the head of the family, why should I pay for your sins? And at that moment, I think he suddenly realized that this life he was living was totally not worth it. Something inside him snapped, and he turned and walked away. Now this is supposed to be the turning point which set him on the path to enlightenment. But I've always wondered what became of his wife and children. In those days, without the head of the house, without a man, it's a very difficult life, and it was what Buddha did. Buddha also, in pursuit of enlightenment, he left his wife and his son behind. So everything in this world has a price, and if you're willing to pay it, I think that's when things happen. So let's leave the wife and children. No further mention is made of them. And Ratnakar made his way to sage Narada, and Narada knew that there was a certain change in this man, and he calmed him down at first, and then Valmiki, who was still called Ratnakar, he asked him, what do you think I should do? How do I cleanse all this sin which is clinging to me? And since he was unlettered, a very rough forest dweller, he couldn't be taught any complicated shlokas, and Narada just told him, I want you to meditate on this one name which I will teach you. And they say that Ratnakar couldn't even wrap his tongue around Rama. So Narada made him say Mara, Mara. He said meditate on that one name. Okay, and so Ratnakar sat down, and he kept saying Mara, Mara, which became Rama eventually, and that one name filled him with so much peace, and he had no difficulty. He had thus far Valmiki had lived like an animal, you know. It was all about his base appetites, but he had no difficulty leaving that behind. He drew so much strength from this, Rama, just saying that name over and over again. And long years passed, and they say anthills grew around him, and Narada came when the time was right again, and he released Ratnakar from this anthill, and he named him Valmiki, because the anthill is called Valmikam, and that's how he got the name Valmiki. Narada embraced him, and he said, "You're one of the enlightened ones now." And this is the story of the author of the Ramayana. And now let's go back to the banks of the river Tamasya, where Narada sat in conversation with him. And once again, Valmiki was eager to talk to him, and he just felt that there was something really good in store for him. He said, every once in a while, I see someone in my dreams. The someone is perfect. He's without sin. He's flawless. He has every virtue. Tell me about this perfect being. Is there anyone like that? And then Narada started telling him about Prince Rama of Ayodhya, and Valmiki was mesmerized. He just sat and listened to every word without moving from there as Narada told him about the life of Rama. And when Narada left also, it was like he could still hear his voice in his ears, and he was so enchanted, and he simply could not get this Prince of Light, this Prince of Ayodhya from his head, and he loved him so much, and his thoughts were consumed with Rama. And as Valmiki was, thinking about Rama, he headed out for a walk with a disciple, and it was a gorgeous day for a walk, and Valmiki was in such an elevated frame of mind, and suddenly he noticed these Krauncha birds, two beautiful birds, and they were so utterly in love, they were so complete with each other, and he was just admiring these two beautiful lovebirds, and suddenly the peace, the serenity, the perfection of that scene was destroyed when he heard the hum of an arrow being released, and it hit that male bird with a thwack, and the poor thing fell down dead, and its mate was circling around this bird, and it was like screaming, it was grief stricken, and tears ran down Valmiki's own face, and he was so moved, and he summoned the hunter, and he cursed him. He said, "Your natural lifespan will be shortened." But to his surprise, the curse emerged in the form of a shloka, in the perfect rhyme and meter. And he was pondering about that. There was a certain heaviness inside him, and that was when Brahma himself paid him a visit, according to legend. And he said, "Everything that has happened to you so far has happened for a reason. It was to prepare you for the greatest endeavor of your life." And then he told him, "See, from your soka, which is sorrow over what had happened to the Krauncha birds, sprang the perfect verse or shloka in the appropriate rhythm and meter." He said, "This is the rhythm and meter you're going to use to set down the greatest story this world has known." And he gave Valmiki divine vision. Suddenly they say that Valmiki could not only see, they say the Ramayana played itself in front of his eyes, and he could not only see the events that actually happened, he could look into the mind and hearts of all the protagonists involved. It was a sublime, life-changing event for him, and with Brahma's blessing, he decided to set down this gorgeous story. And they say that Brahma blessed Valmiki as well as the Ramayana, and he said that both will be immortal. So this Ramayana was composed within the span of a week, 24,000 verses, 6 books, 500 cantos each, and that is how the Ramayana came to be set down. And now let's move on to the story proper. It all started at Ayodhya, which was the capital of the kingdom of Koshala, nestled on the banks of the river Sarayu, a gorgeous jewel of a kingdom. It was ruled by the Solar kings, the kings who belonged to the Surya Vamsa. They claimed ancestry with Lord Surya. And some of the famous kings in that line would be Ikshvaku, and everyone has heard about King Sagara. It was his story, and it was his descendant Bhagiratha who brought Ganga down to the earth. So these were the illustrious kings who ruled at Ayodhya. And at that point, the king of Ayodhya was none other than Dashratha, a very good, kind, noble king who was adored by his subjects. They say the treasury was filled to overflowing, and so was the granary. So it was a lovely time to be alive, I guess. But this good king, he was getting on in his years, and if there was one sorrow he had, it was that he had absolutely no children, though he had many wives. So he decided to perform the Ashwamedha Yaga, and his Kulaguru was sage Vashishta, and Vashishta told him that he would have to get the service of Rishyashringa. Now Rishyashringa was supposed to be such a pure spirited sage. They say that wherever he went, drought and famine would be ended, because he was the bringer of rain, and he was the son-in-law of the king of Anga. His name was Romapada. Romapada was a good friend of Dashratha, and that's how Rishyashringa came to conduct this amazing Ashwamedha Yaga, and it was a very, very extravagant affair. There were lots of holy men there, and it was quite cool how it was happening. Meanwhile, let's go and meet the antagonist of our story, the granddaddy of all villains. It was none other than the 10-headed Ravana, who was a magnificent Rakshasa of many, many accomplishments, though he was evil, I guess. And at that time he was engaged in performing penances. He performed severe penances to win the grace of Shiva, and they say his penance was so severe that when it failed to yield fruit, he started severing his heads one by one and tossing them into the flames. Finally, he was down to one head, and he was ready to chop off this head as well, and that's when Shiva came before him, and he stopped him from throwing away his life, and he granted him a boon, and he restored his other heads as well. And Ravana asked that he become the strongest being in the three worlds, and Shiva granted it to him. Now Ravana was not the sort of guy who would be content with something like that. It was a big deal, but he was not content. He wanted more. So they say he next performed penances to win the grace of Brahma. Brahma was his own grandfather. Ravana was the son of Vishrava, and Brahma was his ancestor. So when Brahma finally appeared before him, he asked for immortality. It's a recurring theme in Indian mythology that all these so-called great villains are so terrified of death. They are fearless, brave guys, but for some reason they are willing to do whatever it takes to avoid dying, to live forever. Ravana was no exception. And it's like Ugve says, you meet your destiny on the road you take to avoid it. So Ravana got the ball rolling himself by seeking to avoid death, and Brahma told him that immortality was not an option, and he said ask for something else. So Ravana thought about it, and he was a very clever dude. So he said I should not die at the hand of Deva or Asura, Gandharva, Siddha, Sharana, the Daityas, the Danavas. So he named all the celestial and semi-celestial beings. The only beings he sort of left out were men, because he considered men to belong to a very puny race, and he did not consider men to be a threat. So he mentioned all these divine beings, and he asked to be spared death at the hands of the gods, the demigods, the lot of them, the demons, the Rakshasas. And Brahma smiled to himself, and he said, sure, you will not die at the hands of these beings. And Brahma went on his way, and Ravana had this false sense of complacency, and he embarked on a reign of terror. He was a tyrant who defeated the celestial army, and they say he became the lord of the three worlds, and he ruled from Lanka. Before we go back to Ayodhya, what had happened was the Devas had approached Brahma. They complained about Ravana, and they asked for relief. Brahma asked them to appeal to Lord Vishnu, and Vishnu listened to their prayers, and he promised to take to incarnate on earth, to come as an avadara. Okay, and so it was all decided. And meanwhile, this yaga was going on in Ayodhya, and at the completion of this grand yaga, they say that a celestial being emerged from the flames of the yaga, and he was bearing this golden goblet, and it was filled with payasa, and it was silvery and it was shining, and he emerged from the flames, and he offered this to Dashratha. Now they say Dashratha offered half of this to his first wife, the wise and gentle Kausalya, and he offered half of what was remaining to his second wife Sumitra. and half of what was remaining was offered to his favorite and youngest wife Kaikeyi, and whatever was left was once more given to Sumitra. And there was such an air of anticipation and joy that year when the queens announced that they were all pregnant, and Dashratha, they say he really spoilt them even by the standards of royalty. He ordered the finest silks, covered them with jewels, he fed them the rarest and most delicious morsels of food, and there was so much celebration. And Rama was born first to Kausalya. They say she experienced no pain. It was such a peaceful, joyous experience for her. And Sumitra delivered the twins Lakshmana and Shatrughna, and Kaikeyi of course gave birth to Bharata. And it was a beautiful time in Ayodhya as the princes grew up. The citizens adored the 4 princes of light. They were very, very special. Rama and Bharata were dark hued, whereas the twins were golden. And now normally twins have a very close bond, but here Lakshmana, from the time he was born, he would never ever be separated from Rama. The two of them won't even eat if the other is not there, apparently. So the two of them were always together. They say Lakshmana was like his shadow even at night, and it was the same with Bharata and Shatrughna. And as they grew up, they were placed under the care of Vashishta, who was responsible for educating them. And not surprisingly, these princes were proficient in all the arts, in all the sciences, in weapons lore. Everything they touched, it was like they were experts at it. And even among these 4 who were without peer, Rama stood apart. Okay, there was something truly extraordinary about this prince. To know him was to love him. It was to characterize Rama throughout his life. Everyone who knew him just adored him with good reason, because he was that rare guy who knew how to combine strength with kindness. He was easily the most talented of them all, a brilliant, remarkable warrior, and yet there was something so kind and compassionate about him. He had a sweet word for everybody, always ready to share a laugh or a meal with anyone who wanted to, just something so special about him. And his brothers worshipped the ground he walked on, and Dashratha, Rama was like his life. He was so insane about his son, and father and son were so close. So this was a lovely period, the childhood of the princes. That concludes episode 1 of Ramayana with Anuja. Thank you so much for joining me. Please subscribe to our channel and hit like, and do share the link with friends, family and anyone at all who might be interested. Join me again for episode 2. I will be sharing the grand adventures of Rama and Lakshmana as they make their stake for glory. Until then, take care.
நலம் அன்புடன் நமது கிராமங்களிலிருந்து ஆரோக்கியா பால்